proudest day, and the proudest time in the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. You know, I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all was said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.
The 2026 season continues with Krunching Gears, the rally podcast. And Connor, we have a very special podcast this time.
Oh, listen, this is a great opportunity to reminisce, dig up some old memories and chat about the good old days, Kevin.
That's for sure. Jon Desborough, what can we say? A legend of a man. He has been there, done that, seen it all. You know, back in the early 2000s, he was Mr. WRC. And like the stories he's going to tell now are just unbelievable.
Look, the amount of people Jon has probably brought to the sport, because I suppose the whole Channel 4 initiative was around bringing in new people to the sport, explaining the sport to people who'd never seen it before, to a new audience. And I suppose really in the heyday, particularly in the UK, where it was Richard Burns and Colin McRae, two heroes. And I suppose the British media really lapped that up and made the most of it. And on the back of that, you had Jon in the thick of that, with Channel 4 and then ITV, and the coverage that they give the WRC, it was amazing.
That's for sure, yeah. So just sit back and enjoy the stories. Let's hear from Jon. Jon, I suppose the most obvious place to start is, where did you come from? How did you get involved? Or suppose give us your backstory.
I was working at Sky News when an invitation came through from the Subaru Rally team to go to Cornbury Park and meet Richard Burns. And I thought, well, this would be a good day out of the office. I'll go and do this. And I'd spent the last 4 years trying to get close to all the Formula One guys, people like Damon Hill and David Coulthard. And we'd done quite well. This was back in the days before Sky had the rights to Formula One. And I got quite heavily into that. And then this invitation came to Cornbury Park, so I turned up. And then Burnsy being Burnsy said, put those overalls on and I'll give you a go. And they were Robert Reed's. So I sat in the car. And Cornbury Park was on the 1999 Rally GB. And they were doing a test, I think, or they were just doing passenger runs. And he said, right, get in the car, we're off. And he drove down what was really only 2 to 3 kilometres of narrow tarmac with grass either side around a country house. So picture a massive English country house, the way they did back in the 90s on the RSE, and this was one of them. And it literally changed my life. I got in 2 minutes later, when everything had gone past in horizontal streaks of colour. He just turned to me, he said, what's it say down there? And he just led across to a black box which Robert would have between his feet as the co-driver. And I'm shouting, he said, what does it say down there? He said, what are you talking about? Read the figures. No, I said, it says 160. What does that mean? He says, that's our speed in kilometres an hour. And it was the first time I'd sat in a rally car. As we belted ourselves in, me and Robert's fire overalls, he turned to me and he said, are you ready? Well, actually, he turned to me and he said, are you ready? And I said, yeah, fine, whatever. And the first thing I can remember is my head doing this 4 times as he went through the gearbox. I'm going to have a broken neck by the time we get to this square right after about 200 yards of narrow tarmac, decent condition tarmac, and he's got the inside and the outside of a square right marked with a little bit of, 2-1. And as we came up, I thought, well, he's messed this up. But we were through it so quickly. Another 300-400 metres through some iron gates, over a main road, out the other side, probably a kilometre the other side of this old country house. And then he stopped, put his foot on the brake, turn clutch pull, span the car around, turned to me, and I'm still looking out of this car, looking at sort of steam and gravel. And he turned to me, he said, what do you think? And I was like this. I was just completely, I couldn't describe to you what happened. But eventually I remembered what had happened and was compos mentis enough to read this out to the 1,000 people that turned up to his memorial service in 2005 after he died. And he said, "Did you enjoy that?" And I was like, he said, "Well, we'll go and do it again." And he took me back and repeated the whole thing backwards. And after that, I thought, nothing can ever repeat this. Not even a passenger ride with Colin in the Ford that year, and a passenger ride the wrong way around the rally stage at Silverstone with Tommy Mackinnon, who's going to go on and become world champion that year. So that was the year it all changed. And I thought, somehow I've got to get into this. And the guy I work with now, and he'll tell you it's all wrong, he came into the office in the newsroom at Sky News in 2001, and he said, the TV rights are moving from the BBC to Channel 4. David Richards at ProDrive, who we'd met, is going to try and get them onto Channel 4. You should go for that job. And I crawled across London on my knees on the basis of having had these 3 passenger rides and just begged them to give me the job. And, in 2002, it all happened. And it was all so new. The first night in Monte Carlo, everything it never been done before. An hour a night for Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And it was all going to be live. A lot of it was recorded, and it was sort of pioneer and country trying to make rally as big as Formula One, which at the time had got a bit boring because Schumacher was winning everything. And I think the guys at Channel 4 thought we can really do something interesting with this. And those Channel 4 years were formative. They were exciting. They were just so exotic. They were fantastic. And when we did the long trips, when you got onto the plane, you turned left, and a lady handed you a glass of champagne and said, "Mr. Desborough, your seat's over here." And, we stayed at great hotels and met incredible people. It was so exotic. Went to places that I didn't even know existed. I couldn't find them on the map, couldn't pronounce half of them. But they were all, the classics of... I remember telling a story saying we go to Finland and to Argentina for speed. We go to Australia and Cyprus for heat. And then the season finishes at a landfill site in Junction 40 of the M4 called Philindra. And that's where the glamour stops. But it was a terrific 4 years, and I really, really enjoyed it. And when they came back and said in 2012, look, we need someone to come out and stand in for a producer, do you want to do it? I jumped at the chance, and then I just got back in, and I've been doing it for however many years.
Yeah,
Can't imagine.
But that time when it moved to Channel 4, the championship was really in a purple patch. It was it was back page news. It wasn't just an afterthought. It was we had, not long after Colin had won his championship, and Richard had just won his championship that year too. So this was not only across Europe, but in the UK alone, it was big news.
Well, the Mitsubishi team, all the teams were based in Britain. Subaru, Mitsubishi, Hyundai, Ford. The only one, Citroen were coming along, and we didn't realise what was going to happen. When we did some pre-shooting in Corsica in October 2001, it was the first time I met Seb Loeb, and he was just happening in 2001. And I kind of, in a Sky News fashion, bundled my way through, shook his hand and gave him a bit of broken French from school to say, hi, I'm going to be working on the championship, and then got bundled out of the way by this guy with a beard and a Subaru jacket on, who just happened to be David Richards. Okay, what's going on here? There's a story there as well. And, from there on, the French started to take it back. And I do say to some people, it's just a shame that we were 2002, we started on Channel 4. If we could have had the championship win, that might have been the better year, or maybe 2000. By the time 2002 came along, and then 2003, Colin went off to do the Dakar after a year with Citroen, and then Richard got sick at the end of 2003, and then suddenly in the ITV years, we were left without any really British involvement. Until the boy Meek turned up.
Yeah, for sure. But we often hear we know Colin McRae was something else beyond rallying. He was, and still remains to this day a name that the person in the street will know what it is. Was he that and more?
Yeah, he was the guy that cleared the car parks and cleared the forests, and it all came down to the stage to watch him come through, because people just wanted to see him, and he was different because he got the game. He broke out of rallying. He got the game Colin McRae Rally, which sold around the world by the truckload. people had told me that the Japanese thought he was rallying's equivalent to Lara Croft. He wasn't real. He'd been invented. And then they were told that, no, he's actually real. He exists. And he used to say the one with the best toys or the most toys wins. He had the most toys because he could afford them, because he got that game, Colin McRae Rally. And in 2006, I went up to see him for a thing on Sky One. I was doing a show called Vroom Vroom, and I went to see him at Jerviswood. And he drove me around in his 22B and told me a story about how, see if I can get this right. I told him that story, that in Japan they thought he was the rallying equivalent of Lara Croft. He didn't exist. He said, it's funny you should say that. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were on the phone, and we're chatting away, talking about this, that, and the other, and how's your father? And he said, I put the phone down to Colin, and I sat down, and my lad, this friend's lad, said to him, who was that? And Colin's friend said, well, that was Colin McRae. And the young lad, probably 9 or 10, said, Colin McRae 1 or Colin McRae 2? all of this while scooting past people around Lanark in this 22B. And he was everything you can imagine he was. He was missing that part of the brain called fear. He was just all swagger. Which, for a while was just show business. I mean, it was just sex on wheels. It was fantastic. And everybody wanted to meet him. Tommy might have had 4 championships. Yeah. Colin had the 1. But they all wanted to meet Colin because he was the most famous rally driver. And I still think even now in the kind of sensible world, is it sensible world of the WRC, that Seb Ogier could go on and win 29 championships. He still wouldn't be as famous as Colin McRae.
Yeah, and is it like there was a certain, you say swagger to him and all, but there's a certain shyness to him as well too.
Oh yeah,
he wasn't his most comfortable in front of the cameras, really.
No. And in fact, in the first book that I wrote, I definitely parodied a bit of the Colin McRae spirit when we were talking about vodka. Yeah. At that point, different animal appeared. Colin was a good night out. Robert Reed, good night out. Richard Burns. No, he went to bed early, but Colin, what he expressed himself with that car and the way he drove, and in a way he was a little bit frightened when the camera turned up. I can remember once I went to see him probably in '99, maybe a little bit earlier, and I got to down in Port Talbot at the Shakedown. I got a chance to do an interview. The people at Ford said it must have been '99 because it was when he moved to Ford. They said he's going to come into the car park. We're going to just open the door, stick the camera in, do the interview there. And I couldn't remember how many times he'd won Rally GB. And I said to him, Colin, you must be the favourite for this weekend. I mean, how many times have you won Rally GB? Bluffing the fact that I've forgotten how many times. And I really should have known. And he looked at me and said, well, you tell me. And I thought, okay, fine. A little bit of fire there. Said, well, all the same, you still must be the favourite to win this weekend. And he was a little bit uncomfortable, I think, in front of the camera. But, put him behind a car and he was terrific. In the Ford year, in 1999, I went up to the Lake District to have a passenger ride with him. And as they put me in the Ford and they strapped me in and put the crash hat on me, and I realised that I was so strapped into the car that I couldn't get my hands to the dashboard. And he was next to me. And it's the first time we'd met. And, this was the guy. This was the legend. This was the one that had crashed all the cars, won all the championships. This had got the game. He was more famous than lots of Formula One drivers. A legend in his own right. And I thought, I'm just going to break the ice here. I'm a bit frightened. And they plugged in the pelter so I could hear him breathing through the pelter. And I could hear my pulse going. As I'm thinking, I don't know what's going to go on here, but it could be ugly. And we'd had a little drive round the stage just to see where I was going to place my Sky cameraman. And at the end, there was a sort of a big kind of crest with some logs and then about a 200-foot drop into a field of cows. And I was worried, about what this guy could do with me in the car at that point in the stage. So I turned to him and I said, Colin, there's just something I need to ask you. Have you driven this stage before today? And he said, no, this is the very first time. At which point, the fear in my eyes, and this was the kind of attitude that he had that would inspire that sort of reaction in me and other people. And it worked. It worked brilliantly. Created the myth. It was fantastic.
And John, there's a lot of stories that behind the scenes at the events, himself and Nicky Gress were, practical jokers and pranksters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you witness that or see that?
No, a lot of that was kind of kept away from us at that point, because I think even then they'd been snaffled up by the corporate world and sort of told to behave. But eventually they managed to relax. With Robbie around, there was always a door into the McRae world. And when we did the McRae stages, we had a fantastic night afterwards. I think it was in Perth. I remember nothing of it. I just remember, McRae showing me a McRae night. And I do remember my very last night on the World Championship in 2005 in Corsica, where we'd had such a night out. He phoned Robbie up the Sunday morning, to find out if I was still alive. Because he was handing me little glasses in this bar in downtown Ajaccio, saying, "Would you like some local water there, John?" Of course, he'd snaffled a bottle of vodka from somewhere. And it was my last night in the championship, and I thought, well, what the hell? And it was a horrible, horrible last morning. And he'd had to phone Robbie to say, "Is Desborough still alive?" And I was. He was good. He was good. The first night, it was a night at some Stars and Bars after the first Monte Carlo, when he looked at me at the bar and he said, "You're not so bad, really, are you?" And he looked at me, he said, "Trouble is, you remind me of my English teacher at school." And I thought, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But there was one Rally GB where he was at the bar and we were fighting to get a drink from some hotel, and we couldn't get in. The season had finished, so it was all getting a bit silly. And he said, "Do you want one of these?" And he'd got all these vouchers from somewhere. And he just handed me a fistful of these vouchers to get a drink. And he got, like a pack of cards of vouchers, because everybody wanted to have him around. Everybody wanted to just sort of be there and enjoy the myth. But he wasn't exactly comfortable in that kind of surrounding. He was much more comfortable in a car, doing what he did. Sadly missed.
Yeah.
Sadly missed.
And when you look, like, at the time, did you realize what you had with regard to Colin, Richard, Tommy, etc. being there? Or is it only when you look back now you go, actually, that was a golden era?
Yeah, it was the golden era. I can remember on a Monday morning we'd go out and do pre-shoots for the following round, and Penny, Mallory and Robbie, they were just looking at the watches thinking, I've got to get home. I've got to make the airport, what about the car hire? And I remember saying to Robbie Head, just relax. In a few years, we're going to look back and laugh. They paid us to do this. It's so great. We're going to so many great countries, and they're also paying us to do this. So just relax and enjoy it and be in the moment. And, it was right. The Channel 4 gig lasted 2 years, and ITV was 2 more years. So, yeah, you're right. I still look back and, think of those as the glory years. And the only other glory year I kind of think of as the best one was the 2017, where at Rally GB, Malcolm and M Sport went, Jack, Queen, King with the 3 championships, drivers, the rally win, and the championship as well, with an Ogier, with Seb Ogier driving that car. I think that was another terrific year. And, it'd be nice if we could get those back somehow.
But, even, the names there you've listed off, you got a chance to sit in the cars with.
Yeah.
Anybody that's any passing interest in rallying would have cut off their left arm just to get that chance. And at that time, it was your job. You obviously, to listen to you, it was more than a job. This was what lit the fire. This was the and at that time, did you realise that this is life changing?
Not really. You do take it all for granted. I was trying to concentrate. I was trying to make sense of it, but I realised that I was the outsider. Robbie was the previous driver. Penny had been in a championship. Jeremy Hart had worked on the championship already, and I was the fan who was coming in. I think because coming from Sky News, I had the background in live telly, so that they could put me in front of a camera and I'd be okay. I was a safe pair of hands. But I was the kind of the outsider. I wasn't involved in the actual nuts and bolts of it. So I was learning as I was going along and trying to find out, what on earth was going on. And I wish I had the knowledge that I have now. Then it could have been so much better. And as I say, it would have been nice if we could have done it in 2001, 2000. It would have been just a little bit more relevant with, Colin and Richard at the absolute pinnacle. Sport loves a duel. It likes two people competing, and we had two people competing, and we had two different personalities. There was Colin, who was on it from the word go, and then there was Richard, who would think his way through a rally. And I remember for Rally GB, we were back page of the Times newspaper on the Friday morning. Unheard of now, and all of it has gone away from us. So I'd like to come over to Ireland, please, and can you get me John Coyne's phone number?
I can sure can be arranged. But at that time too, there was Rally Excess, a magazine, and it was the glitz and the glamour and the glamorous ladies and everything else, and it was really stoking up the background stories, and it always kind of pitched Colin and Richard against each other.
Yes.
Was there any real rivalry between them, or was that more for the show?
They got on. I think because they both realised that actually they were very similar. They're in a similar position, that they both were benefiting from doing something that they loved, albeit in a different way, and albeit having different personalities. But the press liked a duel. It liked a battle. And they would try and, tease a comment out of one about the other, and then they would get the fire underneath the whole situation. And in a way, they didn't like that, but you'd find them together. They got on. Richard probably hated the Finns most. In fact, I once heard him walking around the motorhome in Finland in one year when he was leading, swearing about the Finns when he was taking it to the Finnish drivers. Colin was in the same situation, that the championship was just beginning to get away from them, and they realised that. And we were on limited time, weren't we? We had about 2003, and at the end of 2003, everything changed. Good times.
For sure.
Very.
And
good.
and Richard too. Richard, he was, as you say, very calculating, very smart. Always seemed to be thinking about things. He never spoke without there was a lot of thought went into whatever he said. Yeah. And you got the opportunity to write his autobiography. Yeah. Was that such a, even at the time it was probably special, but looking back now with hindsight, it must make it even more special.
Yeah, and I look at the book and I think that it's actually still relevant now. Julian Jacoby, who was Ayrton Senna's agent, was approached to become Richard's agent, and he was. And at one awards night, the legend of motorsport agents, Jacoby, turned to me and I said, "Hello, Julian," and I thought, this is the man who's the gateway to doing more books like this. And he said, "Oh yeah, you're the guy that ghosted the Richard Burns book." I said, "That's right." And Richard was his client, and he said to me, "Yeah, I really like the pictures." And I thought, great.
Thanks.
But it was fantastic. Richard was, when I met him, was one of those rare athletes who had not only just done it, but he could tell you what it was like to do it in terms that I could understand. So he could sit me in the car, which was a great talent. And so I liked him a lot. And the first time we met, we just got on like a house on fire. So doing the book was very easy. And, it was a great privilege. And it was done so well by Hodders that it was based around pictures. I think Colin had done one a couple of years before, and it was mostly words, which is why I say when I come to do the stories, I realise that we need more pictures in there, because we do pictures. And he was very good at sitting me in the car and telling me what was going on and what was going through his mind. And this was a guy who had 29 descriptions for a corner. So he got a description going in, description at the apex, and a description coming out. And he gave me, we did a session after Corsica, and he just won his first tarmac stage in Corsica for Peugeot. And I said, "Go on, just give me the stage in all the notes." And he gave me the entire stage in the notes. Jeez. It was fantastic, including, the different widths of tarmac where he could hook the car. the condition of the tarmac, the elevation, where he could push and make a difference. And it was fantastic, which is why I think Simon Davison, who worked with him, called him Pentium, because his brain, I mean, ironically, think about how he died, and his brain could handle all this information, which is why he and Robert were so good in fog and mist, that he could just, picture where to go.
Like, was it photographic memory or?
Well, I think a lot of them have got that. And I don't know whether that helps or hinders drivers these days. When they try and learn a stage, and when they try and they watch videos now forever and ever, even before stages, and I don't know whether that helps or hinders. I think they should trust what they're hearing. The pace notes it's like a foreign language, and that generation grew up with a foreign language from a very young age, and his notes were quite complicated, although very simple, because on the page he just had 2 columns to each page of notes. One column top to bottom, then on the right hand side top to bottom, 5 notes on each one, so that when the gravel crew phoned up, they could give him 3 numbers, and the first number was the page, the second number was the column, and the third number was the note, and then the instruction changed to 6 right or 5 right. So it was a really fast process, and I don't know whether all that sort of stuff still goes on quite as much today. But then I'm an old git.
but he revolutionized the way notes are made. The detail that goes into notes, like it's not fair to say, but before that it was more or less left and right than straight, and as you say, there was 3 notes per corner. He broke it down into such fine margins. And now it has become the norm. Even at clubman rallying now, it's got to that level now as well. Yeah,
and he realised that being gentle on the car was a good thing. And Seb Ogier is the prime example of that these days. Look after the car, look after the tyres, and they'll look after you. And he would think his way through. He would always have, an effort stage that he would pick, or a stage where he thought he could pull out 5, 10, 20, 30 seconds on everybody else, and then watch them respond and fail. And the more detail he got, the better. So he took a thinking approach to it, and it even to the point where he realised he didn't need to win every rally. He was on for the championship in 2003 when he was taken ill, and I think at that point, had he done well at GB at the end of the 2003 season, he could have become a twice world champion, which was something even Colin hadn't got. It was that close to bettering Colin McRae. And he couldn't, and he'd realised that season, and I think the championship season as well, that lots of podiums actually were better than a DNF followed by a win followed by DNF. So he'd even thought about that. So a different approach.
And we've seen you talked about Colin having like a kind of like a very shy thing. Like Richard seemed to be this cold, calculating thing. But then at times it was very much heart in the sleeve. Had he almost 2 different personalities?
Yeah, it was rare. I mean, occasionally his heart was on his sleeve, and he could lose his temper. Just I think when trying to keep control of everything had could become too difficult. But it was towards the end of the 2003 season, I think, when he realised he didn't know he was ill, but he just couldn't work out why he couldn't make sense of notes. And there are places, I think, from Spain onwards where he was turning to Robert saying, these notes just don't work. Something is wrong. I don't know what it is. And that would have been his second year in the Peugeot. And at that point, he'd already got the deal to go back to Subaru, which was, in the offing, which of course never happened. And I think he was just getting annoyed that he couldn't find an answer to a problem. He couldn't think it through. Even he couldn't. And he used to get annoyed by that. And I think he also got a little bit annoyed by, Colin having the boat and the plane, and the jet ski and everything else that went with it, and the Lamborghini and the place down in Monaco. Where Burnsy was probably just, he was a cheapskate, didn't spend money on anything. Oh, God bless. Shouldn't speak ill of the dead. I do often think, I used to sit in the commentary booth for the All Live thinking, if Burns and McRae were still alive today, I would not be in this job. Or if I could have him co-commentary. Can you imagine having Colin McRae on co-commentary? And even that's missing. Even that little bit of influence we haven't got anymore.
Yeah, it'd be like having Steve Davis and they call him Taylor.
Yeah, and they've all, all those people go on and they make names as commentators and stars and experts and things. They would have had some funny things to say, those two.
Because as you say, Burns had a way of describing things and the way that a layman could understand it, and that would have transcended into commentary. That would have transcended again beyond the sport.
Yeah, he would have had a way of explaining it that we all could have understood. But to breaking out of the sport, which is what everybody wanted somebody in rallying to do, being known to people outside of the sport. Colin had that with the Codemasters game, Colin McRae Rally. That was the big thing that everybody could get into, and they all loved that. And in a way, we need to get into cultures like that, into gaming cultures. We need to kind of break out. F1 has got Drive to Survive, and it's got the film, whether you or not you think they're good or not, but rallying hasn't got that, or not yet.
Yeah, because even the F1 movie that came out last year, it's the returning hero. That is the Colin McRae role. To step in and come back and save the day. He would have been that maverick. He would have been the hero that strolled back in again with the shades on.
Yeah, would have been great. And he did have a go in 2005. He came back with Skoda. And, it all started all over again. The attention, the cameras, people following him around. Because by that point, we could see that Marcus won a second championship. Petra won a championship. 2004, I think Seb Loeb won one. We were thinking, man, is it all going to come back? At a good time is going to return. Can we all be Colin's mate? Can we see him at the bar afterwards? What kind of crack's going to kick off? This would be fantastic. But it never happened. I think after there, Citroën realised what a talent they got in Loeb. The car suited him. The way that car was driven from 2004, 2005 onwards suited Seb Loeb. Everybody in France got involved in this great driver. And you could almost say, and I don't know if we had Seb Loeb on the show, I'd say to him, you might have ruined the sport, Seb, because you were that good. And other people realised that they just couldn't make an impression. It was just Seb Loeb again. And thankfully, that's not where we are at the moment. We are getting different winners, which is good.
Yeah, because it was, Seb was an exceptional talent, still is an exceptional talent, and Citroën just hit the sweet spot. It was just everything, just all the stars aligned, and you can't take it away from him.
In the stories, the hero Callum George has one rival, one in.
The French one.
Every French.
Yeah.
And he's got to be a kind of obedient Frenchman as well. The Callum George hero, he's just going to be a bit of a rule breaker, but have a bit of McRae swagger about him. But the Frenchman, there's one scene, I can't remember where I did it, where an alarm comes on, and the Frenchman says, I've got to pull over. And of course, it's a false alarm because the car's, let him down, allowing our hero to go through, take the hour when really he might not have deserved it. That would have been great if Colin had come back. That would have been some story.
Yeah, and we've seen Loeb, as the years, and the same with Ogier, as time has passed. At the start they were seen as a machine. They were just a one-in machine. But now we see them, in a few years later, the family man. The more relaxed side. It was a shame that because that there was no longer mainstream. It was just a dedicated rally program. There was no Channel 4 ITV. We didn't get to see the behind the scenes of them. No. It was just we only seen the one-in machine. We didn't see the bit of fun that they have away from the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Seb Ogier would allow you into his life. There's definitely an interview to be done there. I'm talking to some people about I'm just teasing with the idea of let's go and meet Seb Loeb. Let's go and do the Sebs at home. Could we get the two of them together somewhere in France? Just get cameras on them and spend a couple of days with them. Probably not, because Seb Ogier is so professional, so talented, so ruthless, and has got all the subtleties and nuances down to a T. it's very difficult to bet against Seb Ogier, and he's so clean. I don't know that he's got a kind of bad bone in his body. Whereas I know if we went to meet Seb Loeb, he'd have a tab on and a lager. Maybe be talking about his love handles a little bit, because he's just relaxing there in his shorts. Whereas, Seb Ogier is definitely the corporate man. He's definitely worth his money at Toyota. And, him and Toyota are just a dream operation. And I don't know whether he would even want you to know what his weaknesses were and his foibles and his little personality traits, because he doesn't want anything to undermine him.
Yeah, because he is still the ultimate winner. He is still, I suppose he's still competing at the highest level. You see, this is it, isn't it? So.
The gold standard, the guy should have quit years ago. He's far too old for this. Go off and let somebody else become a champion, please. But he's still able to do it just because he is better, more professional, and more ruthless.
Yeah.
Elvin Evans is great. He's fantastic. He's so fast, but he's not as ruthless as Seb Ogier. Seb knows how to get into Elvin's head. I'm only going to do 10 events this season. Yeah, right. Dirty, rotten French trip. Yeah. He's going to do as many as he needs to win the championship. And, maybe it's the last stage on the last day.
Mm-hmm. And then, like we've seen the way the sport has developed over the years, and, as well as being this, ultimate professional, you're there doing your job, having to do it all. You've also had a great time away from, the front line. You've been over to Donnygal and you've made a lot of friends over there. How did that all come about?
Well, I was at the motor show at the NEC, messing around with the Pirelli girls on the Pirelli stand, and this guy came up to me and said to me, "Do you fancy doing the Shell International, Donnygal?" And at that point, I felt like putting out the mobile and saying, "Hello, security, there's a nutter on the stand. Please get rid of him. He's asking me strange questions about things I don't understand." That nutter, thank God, turned out to be Damien Crawford, who was the chairman of the motor club in Donnygal. And he insisted, he wouldn't let me off the stand without asking me the question. I gave him my telephone number, and then he paired me up with the legend that is Willie John Dolan. Not Willie Jon Desborough, as I was competing with Willie John, and we were known as the Willie Johns. He said, I've got a man who's very reliable, very safe. And he was. He never put a wheel wrong. In what weren't that many events, probably 4 or 5. I think 2 Donnegalls, there was Harvests, there was an Ulster, I think there was one other. So it was a tiny and brief time. So good that I think Willie John wanted to go on. He fancied to go at the championship in Ireland somewhere, either probably on tarmac. And it was 2005 when we did the Ulster National, and I just hadn't got. I really should have said to him, "I'm going back to Sky News because I know the WRC TV is coming to an end, and I need to stay in work, and I need to keep the career going." And I never had the guts to tell him that it was never going to happen. But then he was off to Croke to go and celebrate some, GA final, and left me to pick up the only bit of glass that I've got. Philip White tyres, they still exist. Second in class, Group A in Ulster National. Thank you very much. Seb Loeb, not even you have got one of those. I've got second in Group N. And I've got the record on EWRC. Not a very big one.
But it's yours.
It's still there. It's still there. And Willie John was a gentleman. He was very patient with me because I've been thrown into the spotlight really as the beginner, as the enthusiast in that whole Channel 4 thing. I was the presenter who was getting to know it. I was bringing people from the outside in, hopefully, to understand what the World Rally Championship was. So I needed to kind of take a few steps back, especially after Robbie Head had almost killed me on a hillside in Perth on the McRae stages in 2002. And I thought, I cannot be this bad at the notes. There was one stage on that McRae stages where on the way to stage, I said to him, "Robbie, there is going to be a moment when I'm going to get lost in the notes because we didn't do a recce. And I'm going to say to you, Robbie, drive blind, okay? Drive blind, Robbie. I want you to remember that. It's going to happen. We know it is." And it got to that point where I think I said, caution 4 left, something or other, and he turned right. And, I said 5 right, braking or something, and he turned left, and I thought, this is that moment. I'm lost. I don't know where I am. And I shouted, "Robbie, drive blind." And he looked at me, he said, "I have been for the 3 miles. And there was one stage where he swears to this day we got up past 100 miles an hour, and it was it was up somewhere in the hills north of Perth, and it was something like 200 one over crest, 200 one right over crest, and then the note that I never managed to get out, which was a really tight left-hander going down a hill. And the bit that people on the championship teased me about afterwards was Slippy Maybe. Slippy Maybe was the note I never got out. And we went straight through the corner, straight down the other side, and caused £5,000 worth of damage to this lovely Mitsubishi. And he gave me whiplash, and he didn't talk to me for the rest of the week. But after that, I thought, I can't be that bad. And David Crawford and Willie John Dolan gave me the chance to prove that I wasn't that bad.
And as you say, Wally John, just an absolute legend of the sport. Again, a guy who didn't want to compete at the front, was quite happy to go compete at his level, but give so much to not only rallying, but GAA and his whole community as well.
Yeah, wonderful man. He missed out on the prize giving at the Ulster National that year because he had to go to Croke because his team won. And I shouldn't impersonate him, but I do when I talk to people. And he would say things like, I'd ask him questions and he'd say, "That'll do." And a few words, or he'd say, "Good luck." That would be his final parting comment on the telephone. And it's a very unusual pairing. When you imagine what Willie John Dolan is, I would tease Chris Meek by saying, "You're the second best rally driver in County Tyrone." I've got a phone call about that saying, "John, it's not Tyrone, it's Tyrone, County Tyrone." I'd say, "Chris, you're the second best rally driver in County Tyrone because there's another one better than you." And that was the legend that is the gentleman, Willie John Dolan, who helped me, gave me a bit of authenticity, I think. It allowed me to be able to talk to people who, if they said, "Show us your cards, show us your medals," I could say, "Well, I've got a medal." So I have been there and seen a little bit of it. And it was very good. Very good. There are lots of stories I can't tell.
and I suppose that brings us on to the series of books. I suppose the purpose of the books. What put it in your head to start telling some of these stories or putting them into fiction?
I just thought there's so much up there, and when lockdown came and we missed Argentina, I thought, I'm going to write it my way with my people and my events, and see if I can actually write a story. And I thought it's got to be short, so I'm only going to do 10 chapters, 1,000 words. I'm going to get pictures in, and then I put that one on Kindle, which is where you put a book. And then that went quite well, so I thought I'll do another one, and then a third one followed, which ended up in Alghero. And then a guy I worked with on the WRC highlights said to me, "You've got to make them as a book." So I got a friend of mine to publish 500 copies and sold them. And I thought, well, there's a bit of a demand for this. So then Steve from the highlights phoned up. He said, "You've got to do a sequel. Everybody does a sequel." So by now, I actually can understand. I'm quite good at it by now. I'm a bit like co-driving. I've done 3. I'm on my 4th one. I should know how it's going. So we then went Monte Carlo. I think we went to Corsica after that, and I finished in Greece. And then I put them down. And I thought, I haven't got any more ideas. I don't know where these people go. But I managed to get sex, drugs, and no rock and roll. But I managed to get a little bit of bad behaviour in there. There's some nasty things going on there. And then I left it for a few years. And then about 2 years ago, the thought started to come back to me that I need to update it all. So the latest one on Kindle, which I want everybody to read for, I don't know, was it a couple of euros or something? And tell me whether they like it. Get on Facebook and tell me whether you like it. Is updated. So we've got, as you do, those washed up heroes of the golden year, which I don't say where it is, but you know where it is. It's sort of the late 90s, early noughties. They're all washed up. They're all has-beens. And we're now at the point where they're going to get involved in finding the next British rallying hero. So we're going right the way down to the grassroots. Everything is finished. We've got to find some more talent. We've got to, move it on and promote it. So I sat there and wrote another, I don't know, 10, 11,000 words or something. And I thought, I'll just pop that on Kindle. and then I'll get on to Krunching gears, and they can say nice things about it.
Yeah,
but everybody in Ireland can read it and say, "No, this bloke doesn't know what he's talking about." Maybe John Desborough should have taught him a little bit more about this as well.
No, well, like, in fairness, you have a Donnygal man and a Tyrone man in your early books, so
it had to be in there, didn't it?
Yeah,
it had to be in there. Yeah, because
the main protagonist, Callum, like is he a sprinkling of all the characters you met over the years?
Yeah, he's a bit of everything. I needed to create a backstory for him, which I found very difficult. But I thought, how do I name my hero? What does he look like? And I thought, well, he's got to be, and he's obviously, when you read, he's a version of Colin McRae because he's cool. We find him at the bar. He's very popular. He's got that swagger to him. So it's obviously a version of Colin McRae. But, what's his face going to look like? Well, I found that very difficult to do. How's he going to dress? How's he going to behave? But the name is a kind of a combination of Scottish and Welsh, which I thought would sell a few books in Scotland and Wales. I mean, let's face it, that's what you do, isn't it? I don't know whether it works. I should think the first few chapters that I wrote are probably among the worst. And as I got better, as I got on more books and more stories, I was getting better at telling the stories. So in Time Control Ahead, Callum comes back, but in a different way. He is the returning hero, and things are going to happen. But you can tell when you read it that the guys are older and they're now sitting in a cafe, which is where all old guys sit and talk about the old days, and they argue. So we've got to have some arguments in there. We've got to have some humor in there, got to have some crack. And then suddenly they get thrown into this situation where they're being looked at to find a new British hero, a new version of what went on 25, 30 years ago. And so I suppose what I'm doing is inventing a new set of stories, and we're going to go on an adventure with them. And already, you know how it is, in the middle of the night, I wake up thinking, that's a great line. Yeah. I must remember that, and don't. Those will come along in time. I'll do some more.
But we are blessed with a sport that that there is so many stories and rumours, and a lot of the rumours are true.
Yeah.
And some of the things you couldn't possibly ever write.
But I couldn't have written a lot of these had I not had the passenger rides with Colin, with Richards, because I've been there and seen what it's like. I couldn't have written them if I hadn't have had the access. And with rallying, you do get good access. You can get up to these people. You can meet these people. I don't know whether you can meet the champions of Formula One or tennis or football or whatever. But in rallying, it's very kind of democratic, and you can rub shoulders. Well, you could rub shoulders with them. I don't know whether you can go into Toyota Service Park and rub shoulders with Seb Ogier. I don't know, but the access is always good in rallying, just because it is out there in the open and it's not inside a pen,
Because I've seen this week, the quote of Oitanics was, Formula One is like you drive around a zoo and look at the animals. Rallying, you drive around and look at the animals in the woods or something. I thought that was just such a fantastic way of looking at it, wasn't it?
He's very good.
Yeah. And I suppose that other thing with the rallying community is it is so close to the actual stars in the cars. You do get the gossip, you do hear the stories, you kind of know, from one or two people removed what's going on behind the scenes, whereas you wouldn't get that with the F1 or some of the other sports in the world.
Yeah, I think they really would like to keep us away from them. I remember 25 years ago when I was trying to get inside Formula One circuits to meet these people, I realised, somebody said to me, if Bernie Ecclestone had his way, there would be no fans. It would just be the sport for TV. And a friend of mine who writes a lot on football, a guy called Lee Wellings, has written a piece on Substack saying that football now, the Premier League really is just for television. It's a product made for television, and the fans are going to have to cough up £77 to go along and see, what is a lot of it's just blokes falling over, and we can't pronounce their names. Whereas, in rallying, you're in for a good time, because you're going to do daft stuff. You're going to go to Finland and you're going to go out afterwards, and the sun doesn't go down, so why go to bed? So you might as well go up to Ornimpoja now, and you'll meet a load of mad Finns. You'll have the time of your life. and see cars doing things. Go to Finland, you will truly believe that cars can fly. Go to Sweden and they fly in sub-zero temperatures. The scene is just incredible. And Donnygal had a little bit of that. And I think my ambition, weirdly, is that I now need to go and have a look. I've got to get involved in some of the British rounds, and I've got to go and, if you like, go and do my apprenticeship 30 years too late. But, when they give you the chance to do the World Championship, you don't say no, do you? You just you jump.
And in your role in Sky Sports, you've covered so many different sports. We're inside looking out. You're come at it from a more detached view. What is it that makes rallying so special? Is it the people?
Yes, and in fact, like Oit says, it's daft, it's exotic, it's unbelievable. You can't believe a car like that can drive so fast with trees so close. What is this strange two people in the car, one reading these crazy notes? And also the fact that, you can go to some amazing places, even around Britain and Ireland. I got involved in the Cork, and there was, I think I did a round of the Galway, so I had a look at Moll's Gap. Is Moll's Gap on the Galway? I think.
No, it's Killarney.
Yeah, Killarney. Yeah. Killarney, thank you very much. You've caught me out. I had a look at Moll's Gap, and these are amazing bits of road. I was trying to explain to somebody recently, I'm in a family of people who like food and like cooking, and cooking. I don't know whether you see it on. If you watch MasterChef, they all talk like that. They're all talking with this hand, and they're all doing this. Rallying people, they're going.
And the body's moving with
it. Then it's just lovely to see how they talk in that language, because they're trying to describe a road. And once you've done a bit of this, you never ever see a road as a road. You always describe it, go down 90 left over the bridge, and then there's a fast left, watch out for the dip. People are thinking, what kind of a language is he talking? But very nice.
And looking ahead, so obviously, look, the beauty with fiction is you can write pretty much what you want. And we're seeing, I suppose, a time now where we have another change coming in regulations and how the WRC is going to look. So what does that open up for you with regard to future books?
Yeah, I hope so, because it's maybe everything that's going on now will just become nostalgia, and people will think, oh, well, it was good then. It was much better then. I don't know. Maybe there'll be more people that get involved. Maybe there'll be opportunities. I don't know. I think I put an Ian Fleming quote into the first book I wrote, where he said, everybody always in the front of the book says everything in here is fiction and none of the characters are based on real people. But Fleming said, that's a lie. All of Fleming's baddies, all of his heroes, they're all based on somebody. And everything you see is turned into everything that goes into a fiction. So you can use, when you're writing fiction, you are God. You can make it happen, but it's got to be real. I think it's got to be believable. People have got to understand that it could happen, and they will want a twist at the end. As I always like in a good story, where you have that, wow, I couldn't see that coming. Couldn't say that. We want it in TV, we want it in a film, we want it in a book, and I've got to be able to set it up to be able to then finish it all off. And that's the trick, but I need to still be as close to it as I possibly can, so that it is authentic. And then if I am starting to talk about stuff on cars, then it is for real. And I think the technical bits, they've all come from people in the sport, from somewhere. Bits of it came from Richard, bits from Colin. John Archer was a great contributor. I'd check things out with him. Derek Dauncey, who for years worked with Ken Block, I'd phone him up and I'd go, listen, here's the situation, right? Pretend you're in Monte Carlo. What tyres are you going to pick? And he just gave me, the way they were thinking in those days, which is terrific, because that sort of stuff you don't get too close to. But if you're going to put it in, it's got to be right.
Yeah.
So the temptation is to sort of come back from it all. And there's always the great difficulty in the Channel 4 days that you can't talk down to the rally crowd when you're trying to bring other people in and you're explaining for people like fans like me who don't understand. You can't, while you explain to them, talk down to the rally fans. And I remember the very first night at the launch of the Subaru car in Monte Carlo in 2002, the press officer or the head of media for Subaru came up to me. He said, "Now listen here, Desborough. I don't want you to confusing people because my mother, all right, listen to me. Remember this. My mother, she doesn't know what a differential is. Okay, remember that." And I turned to him and I said, "Listen, pal, I don't know what it is." I don't think I still know how differential works.
Yeah, but does it matter? Really?
No, not really. Not really. There'll be some more, but it's a lonely job writing this because I think, are people going to want this? Are they going to be entertained by this? Is there any sort of audience out there? And I think, even people like J.K. Rowling, when she managed finally to get her publisher, they published, I don't know, 10,000 books and sold about 6. Mm-hmm. And something along the way started all of that. I'd settle for 1% of what Jake.
But this is the problem now with the way that rallying's promote it. We're shouting into an echo chamber.
Yeah.
To do something like what you're doing is, you have to make it sort of appeal to the masses. Yeah. So you have to kind of look outside the box, even thinking back to whenever Channel 4 started its coverage, did the virtual rally.
Yeah.
Wee things like that there, it just made perfect sense. And we've lost a lot of that there. It's, I don't know, sometimes I think we try to oversimplify things.
Yep.
And I don't really know where I'm going with it, but if you know what I mean, yes. I think we need to.
But the beauty of the rally car is there's always a second seat. There's always a chance for a passenger drive. There's always a seat there to put a new young Jon Desborough in, and you can change his life as well now by sitting in that co-driver's seat. Yeah. When I explain to people who don't know, I still go back to, well, do you remember Colin McRae? Oh yeah. Right. That's what I do today. But it's Hyundais and it's Toyotas and it's Pumas. And when I want to try and explain to them the difference between that and Formula One, I show them Oit Tanak in that famous stage in Mexico in, I think, 2015, when he became Oit Titanic, when the car went in the water. And I say, that is how this sport is different. That's real danger. Mm-hmm. Or I play them that DVD where Phil Mills turns to Petter Solberg in the Subaru in whatever year it was, 2004, 2005, on Impoya, and you watch it. I watch this DVD, it's the onboard, and it's an edit of Solberg taking on Impoya at unbelievable pace. Impoya is an incredible place where, car positioning and left over crest and right over crest and stay left over crest and stay right over crest. And the rhythm of trying to get that and get all that speed, and it's a rally you do flat out. And they get to the end of about 10 kilometres. And then Phil turns to Petter and he says, right, this is where it gets fast. And at that point, you've watched the first 10 minutes thinking, oh, this is where it gets fast.
Buckle up.
It's the beauty is, I think every team at every rally should be obliged on a shakedown or probably on a shakedown on a media day to find somebody from where the rally is, a teacher, the MP, somebody, whatever, to sit in that seat, maybe a pupil from a school to sit in that seat, and passenger ride should be given, and that seat should be used everywhere so we can all get a chance to understand it's going to get faster now.
Yeah, because I have been very privileged to see, the likes of Joe Brawley, a GAA star here, getting buckled in beside Daniel McKenna, and different people like that who had never sat in a rally car, didn't know what a rally car was, got buckled in, took up and down the stage, and they come back and they're come out of the car, they're bouncing, they're on the balls of their feet, they're like, oh, this is class, this is fantastic. Yeah. We have such a great sport, and whenever people get a chance to look and taste it, they want more.
Yeah, a rally car, the only place where no one can hear you scream. But you can scream with pleasure and scream with pain. I do remember one of the very first times I went to Wales, meeting an old guy who'd watched me do an interview. It might have been that Colin interview when I was trying to tease a nice quote out of him. And Colin drove off with Nicky, and the door slammed, and we sort of turned the camera off. And the guy said to me, he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm just doing the interview with Colin McRae, great guy, rallying." And this fellow said to me, "You're on television." He said, "Listen, I want to hear the gravel hitting the bottom of the car. Just remember that. That's what I want to hear." And I think the sound, when you've sat in a car and you've heard that, you understand. It's like waves of gravel coming underneath a boat. It's incredible. And there was one, I did a clubman rally with a guy down in Kent in a Mark II Escort, where I had that sensation of what driving on the rear wheels from a rear wheel drive car does. We came round a 90, right? Okay, I'm going to do it. I've got to do it. I'm going to do it. We into the 90, right? We brake, she goes on the front wheel, and then we turn. And of course, I on the left-hand side have come all the way around here as we go around this corner. And I'm looking at a tree. I'm looking out the side of the car at a tree and the road there. And I'm thinking, he's pointing at another tree across the bit of, forest. We're supposed to be going up there. But of course, he's driving it off the back wheels. And things like that, they're exciting. But how do we do that? I don't think you can do that on TV. I think TV can get a lot of things across, but it flattens hills, it flattens crests, it squeezes everything down. And that sort of experience is very difficult to get on TV.
That's for sure. So, John, I suppose the best place to finish is, Wally John, if you're listening, get in contact. There's a man here who wants to come back and have one last hooray in Donnygal.
There's got to be something. I've got to come out. I don't know how or where, but it might have to be the Silver Tassie. It might have to be a couple of Guinness, and we might have to go and find those old fireproof overalls just to see if we still fit in them. And he'll turn to me and he'll look at my Guinness and look at me in my old overalls that have been eaten by the moths, and he'll say, "Good luck." No, I have got to come back to Donnygal. I've said it every year, but something always comes up. There's always so much of a clash, and somehow I've got to go back and retrace the steps of it has to be done. So maybe this summer. So watch out. And at that point, you can tell me whether you like Time Control Ahead. Available on Kindle, but not in all good bookshops.
So what can we say again? But thanks you so much to John. Absolute pleasure. Spending just over an hour in that man's company. We're just still giggling and laughing to ourselves yet. An absolute pleasure. And hopefully you'll come on another time and we'll hear some of the stories you couldn't tell this time. And when Wally John, please, if you're listening, get the Subaru fired up. And get onto those books in Kindle. That I think there's 77 cents for them. What else would you get for that kind of money? It's worth it. There's like 5 or 6 already up there, and obviously there's more to come as well too. So, Connor, we can't recommend them enough.
No, listen, great reading, and if you read between the lines, there's a few characters we know of and a few stories in there from the good old days that, it wouldn't take too much imagination to work out who's who.
That's for sure. That's the latest episode of Krunching Gears, the Rally Podcast. Until the next time, take care, speak soon, and bye.
That's the proudest day and the proudest time in the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all was said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.